This is Beyond Belief Sobriety, a podcast and community for people who are seeking or who have found a secular path to recovery from addictions of all kinds. And if you are finding this YouTube channel for the first time, we're a podcast, and we're a podcast that focuses on secular recovery. We've been doing this since 2015, and there's like 280 some episodes out there. You can listen to them here or wherever else you like to download your podcast. We also have some other types of audio and video content here, so feel free to look around. Glad to have you here. Today I have a guest, and she is going to share her story of recovery, and we're going to kind of turn this into a conversation. So we'll just see how that goes. Her name is Katy, and I'm bringing her out right now. Katy, how are you?
Hi, John. How are you?
I'm doing great. Good to have you here. So this is my favorite kind of episode to do, because I don't have to read a book to get ready. I don't have to do anything but listen to you share your story. And then I can kind of heckle you as you talk and maybe share my own experience with you as you go along. So how's that sound?
That sounds perfect. I came here to not only share my own experience, but I have a lot of questions.
Okay,
And so
cool.
I figured this was a great place to start with some of those questions.
Perfect. I love it. That makes an excellent podcast. The questions and answers, a dialogue. Well,
Awesome.
why don't you begin with introducing yourself and how you got into recovery, and we'll just take it from there.
Sure. So my name is Katy Jacopi. I'm a writer and a professor, special educator, currently not employed at the moment. And really, my recovery began about maybe a year after I actually quit drinking, because it took me about a year to realize that I did indeed have an actual problem. Um, and so the reason why I stopped drinking was because I was diagnosed with bipolarism to, round out my neurodiversity processing disorder and now bipolarism. And in order to go on medication, I had to stop drinking. And this was, I want to say, February 2019. So this was weeks before we started dealing with the COVID situation. Um, and then like I said, about a year into it, I started having bad memories. They weren't exactly like forgotten memories, but they were things that I wasn't willing to deal with. And then after a year of not drinking and getting a new perception, I realized that I did, in fact, have an alcohol problem. Um, and that I also wanted to very much talk to somebody about what I was experiencing. And that's when I started to research opportunities for basically AA, but not I wanted a more secular approach to AA. And there really wasn't all, especially during the COVID uh, time, there really wasn't a whole lot of options for me to get myself involved in. Um, are there any questions before I continue?
No, that makes total sense. So, it took me a long time to get to the point where I was needing a secular way through this. So I started off kind of learning about AA the way that I guess it's presented to people, and I think part of me was interpreting it to myself, but it wasn't until like 25 years of doing this that I realized I was an atheist and was more outspoken about the way I saw and understood the program, and entered into some conflict because of that. And that's when there weren't really any secular options here where I live in Kansas City. So me and another guy, we helped start a secular group here. So I was wondering if during this COVID time, did you learn about the online meetings, the secular online meetings that we have?
I learned about it about 6 or 7 months after the fact when I, started to do some research. And, I first started with looking into, like, 1-800 numbers for, addiction and addiction recovery, and I figured they would have information for me, and they don't. I would speak to one person, explain my situation, which was basically that I'm a non-believer. My skepticism has a lot to do with who I am today and how I got to where I am. I'm not going to go into a situation and be disrespectful of somebody else's belief system, but at the same time, I didn't want to compromise myself during my own journey. And so when I explained that to one person, I would be connected to another person and explaining again and connected to another person and so forth until I finally had a person say to me, do your own research. And yeah, I was kind of taken back. And my response was, well, this is me doing my research. And they said, well, there's nothing we can do. And so I kind of let it go and just said, all right, I guess there's nothing available, but I couldn't just let it go. And the more I sort of just changed up the way I put in information into like the computer to do a search, different kinds of information came back to me. And I found podcasts that way. I found Beyond Belief Sobriety. Excuse me. And so by the time, which kind of brings me to where we are today. So by the time I became aware of these other options, I kind of felt like I didn't need them anymore. I was like, okay, I kind of gone through it. I'm fine. I know what I wanted. I didn't get it. So I found another way to process it and deal with it. And now I'm like, all right, well, doesn't hurt to get back out there again. Now that we're meeting face to face, maybe there are more options in my area for a face to face meeting.
I
Maybe
wonder if
there's
these places you called, did anybody mention any options other than AA, like Life Ring or Smart Recovery, or even
no, they did not.
women for
I
sobriety?
could, huh?
Women for Sobriety is another one that's completely secular and been around since 1972.
Nope, they didn't mention any of that. It was just, it was like I said, it was a 800 number, a national hotline for drug and alcohol recovery, addiction recovery, basically. So I mean, and to be fair and honest, and I'm not the best person who knows about this stuff. So I'm sure there might have been other ways for me to find the information faster. And plus I was very easily discouraged too after a certain point. Um, but no, the like I said, when I did speak to people at this hotline, there was no mention about you know, any other program other than like AA.
Yeah. You know, so many treatment centers and other organizations that have to do with recovery are staffed by people who are familiar with the 12 steps and have only become familiar with the 12 steps, and they haven't really educated themselves beyond that. And there's a certain dogmatism, quite frankly, of people who think that, well, you don't have to believe in God, you just have to be spiritual and do these things, but you don't even have to do that. you know, uh, but they're just not educated enough to even give you resources that you can check out.
And that was a big issue of mine was that I understand, I know a lot of people who are Buddhist and who are also recovering from alcohol. And they'll I from their understanding, if I understand it myself correctly, but it's something outside of themselves that helps them to heal. And so even if this thing that's outside of themselves reconnects to something within themselves to heal, they can still participate in the AA process because they can still use the rhetoric to sort of parallel what their own belief system is. For people who are non-believers, when we're told it's not God, it's a higher power, or it's not God, it's, the universe, or it's not God, it's a conscious being. I mean, I can only speak for myself, but what I hear is it's not a flower, it's a tulip. Or it's not a flower, it's a rose. And to me, what you call it doesn't matter, because the idea is what is problematic for me. I don't believe in a conscious being outside of myself that's going to help me to heal. And if you ask me to join a program where one of the tenets is I am powerless to heal myself unless I give up myself to
Right,
a higher
right,
power,
right.
then I'm already failing walking in through the door, because I can't will myself to believe in something I don't.
So how did you know ahead of time that AA was so religious? How did you know that?
Uh,
Because see, I
just,
did not know, but this was a long time ago for me.
just because basically from what I've seen on television and in pop culture, and also, um, I would probably, now that I'm thinking about it while I'm talking out loud, I would say probably pop culture is how I knew that AA was religious. Nobody in my family is a recovering alcoholic. Nobody's attended meetings. Um, I did have a doctor many, many, many years ago. I was in my late 20s, talk to me about it. But I had already known at that point that I was, basically at least an agnostic, and that
Right.
AA wasn't for me
I think
for
I
that
think
very
it's more
reason.
out there now. From when I started. So I started back in 1988, pre-internet days, right? So I did not know that there was God. I didn't even know about 12 steps or any of that stuff when I went to my first meeting. I just figured it was, people that would help each other. So when I went to that first meeting and they started praying at the end of the meeting, it really kind of freaked me out. I was not that as confident in my beliefs as you are, so I just kind of fell in line and kind of went with it. But I couldn't, ultimately I had to be true to myself. And I am an atheist, and I am like you. I don't need a power outside of myself to do anything. I've got me, and I've got people who can help me. So, what's a shame though is that language, the higher power and all that, when they came up with that term higher power back in 1939 when they were writing the steps, and it was actually an atheist who suggested they do it, because believe it or not, the steps were going to be even more religious. They were really pushing like a specific God. These people that came up with the stuff, they went through a Christian type program, and that's what they were patterning their recovery after. Well, there was an atheist who said that, wanted to tone it down a little bit. So he suggested, power greater than yourself or higher power. And so I think back at the time in the 1930s, and with what they knew then, because they were all just fairly newly sober, that was kind of progressive and it was working for them. But as it turns out, almost 100 years later now, we a lot of people can't relate to that language. And I certainly couldn't even back 30 years ago. I didn't use the term higher power. And I finally realized, after learning about the history of AA and how it developed, that that's someone else's language. I don't talk that way. I don't have higher powers. I have people that help me. So I just started putting my experience in my own words. Those steps are someone else's experiences, that people that are all dead now, that, literally 80 years ago is when they wrote all that stuff. So anyway, but yeah, so
No, I appreciate that. I didn't know that. And I was actually going to say, when we are done, if you can email me some book recommendations or articles, I would appreciate
for
that. That'd be
sure,
awesome.
for sure. So yeah, there's a lot of uh, there's quite a few books that actually secularize the 12 steps, where you can go through that process if you want to, and understand it in a completely secular, self-empowering way, without higher powers or outside sources and stuff like that, or supernatural sources. But not every you don't even need that even. uh, I've come to understand that all of that is again just an experience. It's a human experience, I think, that we have, and and I don't know. You found your own. You found your way. What are you doing now? What you in the interim? You said that you did find a way that you're comfortable with now. So what is that way?
So I found a friend to talk to right away.
Yeah.
And it was somebody who actually has experience with alcoholism herself.
Okay. Cool.
She's not an alcoholic, but her mother
Okay.
was. And so I felt very comfortable going to her. She knows my background, she knows my belief
Uh
system,
huh.
and I knew that she would just let me talk, which
Yeah.
is really what I was looking for.
Yeah.
And so that really did help. And then I sort of got back into writing. I mean, let me rephrase that. I got back into a writing group. I've always,
Oh. Okay.
so
That's very
I got,
therapeutic.
yeah, right. I got back into a writing group and taught and used my writing group as an opportunity to write poems about my experiences, with alcoholism and trying to get healthy and some of the hurdles and walls that I've dealt with over the years. um, actually, this is probably a good segue into a question.
Okay.
One of my bigger questions that I have, which is also why I was started this process again.
Okay.
Um, so I know that I have a problem with alcohol, and I know that the right decision for me is to not drink. But I am somebody who uses medicinal marijuana. So can I call myself sober, or do I call myself someone who's not drinking? Like, I don't know.
Uh,
Again, I want to know, how do I there's so many
I
questions and I don't
know.
know how to answer these questions, which is why.
So you decide for yourself what your recovery is. You decide for yourself. Um, there's a lot of people that are prescribed marijuana for a lot of different reasons medically, and it's prescribed. So, in my opinion, it wouldn't interfere. And if it doesn't interfere in your life, like alcohol does, then certainly that's your recovery. You're in recovery. And speaking of words, that word recovery has actually been defined by the Substance Abuse and Mental Health Services Administration as nothing more than a process of change and of personal growth, really. So it's something that someone who's dealing with an addiction or some sort of problem behavior that they want to change will pretty much come up with a plan to figure out what they want their life to look like. And that's the recovery process. And nowhere in there does it talk about, abstinence or anything like that, because there are relapses too as you go through that process. And even if there is a relapse, you're still going through a process, hopefully, of change where those become fewer and further between until eventually you don't even have any. You may not ever have any. But yeah, so it's up to for you to decide what sober means for you. Seriously,
Like
in
I
my opinion.
said, I really stopped for in order to finally deal with my mental health issues. And then a year later, I accepted that I did have a problem with drinking. Um, but yeah, it was very hard for me to know to even how to talk to myself with friends. And one of the first times I actually spoke to a good friend about it, I did receive pushback saying, well, you can't say you're sober because of the medicinal marijuana. And I said, because one of the other things that I take is gabapentin, which is for my bipolarism, and not in Connecticut, but in some states, it is a controlled substance. And so using marijuana, um, if could I still call myself, sober if I was using if I'm using
Sure.
gabapentin?
Yeah.
And my first thought would be, well, yes,
Yeah.
because I'm not abusing it.
It's
A
a
person,
prescribed medication.
yeah, exactly. And that was my response to this person. And their response was, but we're talking about marijuana. because there's a different attitude regarding medicinal marijuana. And it's true whether you're somebody in the medical field or if you're just, a layperson, there's just this attitude that even when it's prescribed, is not really for medicinal use. It's a nudge, nudge, wink, wink situation.
Well, there might be, like there are probably other medications that people will abuse, but that doesn't mean that there aren't legitimate uses for it either. So, I took this course to become what they call a certified peer specialist in my state, Missouri. And a certified peer specialist is somebody, most of the people that get that certification, they work in treatment centers with treatment teams, and they act as a advocate for the person in recovery. And while I was taking the course, the one thing that they really taught us was that the most important thing is that you meet somebody where they are, and you just want that person to figure out what they want, help them remove any obstacles that are in their way of achieving their goal of what they want their life to look like. And the whole idea is that you just not harm yourself as much as you were before. And I know drinking for me was extremely harmful. I just couldn't function. So that was one thing I just had to do without. But if there was something else that wasn't causing me a problem, then that's okay, for me. And that's what they taught me as I went through this. There is no definition that you put on someone else for what their recovery is. So that's how I understand people to operate in the treatment field today. And I'm not a professional either, but you meet someone where they are, you find out what their goals are. Obviously, if there's a medical reason why they shouldn't do something, then, a doctor would tell them that you probably shouldn't do that. But as far as, people in the recovery field, my understanding is they find out what, would help you and what you want. So, and you've already decided that alcohol is the problem. And, alcohol's a serious drug. So giving that up is a big deal and
Well,
makes
it
a
was
big difference in
definitely
your life.
the first step in a recovery, mental health
Yeah.
recovery.
I bet it's made a
And
big difference.
oh yeah, it's I mean, when I first stopped drinking, I was also kind of like, I'm so excited. I'm getting my life together. I'm going to go on medication. And so at first it was just like this great whirlwind. Everything's amazing. Look what I missed out on. And then the memories sort of started
Uh-huh.
seeping in. And memories about, you know, blacking out.
Right.
Like I would wake up in the morning with no memory of putting myself to bed.
Right.
And I used to think, well, at least I put myself to bed, so that's a good thing. But it wasn't until I stopped drinking that I realized, no, that wasn't a good thing. The blacking out is the issue.
Right.
That's the problem.
Right.
Great, I didn't wake up outside of my house,
Right.
but still, it's still an issue. It's still a health concern,
Yes.
mentally and physically. So,
Yeah. But there are now a lot more options for people like us. I'll send you an email and I'll post them in the show notes here too. But LifeRing is a really great option, completely secular, and it just provides mutual support. People that want to support you and what you want. Smart Recovery has more of a Smart Recovery is based upon cognitive behavioral therapy for the most part. And so they have these tools that you can use that are based upon CBT that help you kind of change your reaction to events in life, how you think about things. And that helps with motivating you to want to stay sober and make changes and deal with urges and stuff like that. So they're really about, like, these really hardcore, cognitive behavioral therapy tools. And at the meetings, they have like someone who's been trained to facilitate the meeting that will go through one of those tools pretty much at every meeting. So you kind of learn about those tools. I've gone through that training and I like smart recovery. I like those tools. And I'm just now getting to my feet wet with the Life Ring group. And I like them because they're so laid back. There's no dogmatic program of any sort that you have to follow. It's really everybody gets to design their own recovery program, which is the way it should be, really. But they're there to support you. You have friends there who are supporting you. You know.
And that's the reassuring part is people who are like-minded. Uh, and then you know that you're going into a situation, um, a community, it's people who, like you said, who want to support one another and help each other. And I know I mentioned that one of my concerns was that I didn't want to walk into a community and be honest about my outlook at life only to maybe hinder someone else's experience, even if it was only for a 30 seconds, but I didn't want to be a contributor to that. And I remember when I joined the writers group, the moderator of the group, I pulled them aside and I explained to them that I was an atheist and that a lot of my poetry looks at my skepticism, especially in relationship to my alcoholism. And would that be okay? And they said it was fine. And then a couple of weeks later, when I was going to share a poem, another person shared a poem about being in AA and needing the serenity prayer and giving it up to a higher power.
You just can't get away from
Uh,
it, can
right.
you?
And the thing is, and I could be wrong, maybe it wasn't in this person's poem. Maybe the poem led them to talk about their experience. So, just for the sake of honesty, I just want to acknowledge that. But I just remember sort of being like, well, I'm not going to share now, because like I didn't want to follow up with a poem about how I felt so rejected by a community that's supposed to be about healing and helping, and then perhaps maybe insult this person's experience. Even though that's not my intention, it can still come across that way.
Yeah, I, it's too bad that this is even an issue in AA. I wish I could tell you that people wouldn't give you a hard time or be offended, but my experience was that they were. So what would happen with me, and this is a group I went to for 25 years. And when I started sharing in meetings how I saw the steps just as a purely practical, you know, approach, no higher power necessary. I think most of the people were cool about it, but there were just a small amount of people that really gave me a hard time. And it only took those few people to make me feel uncomfortable at those meetings. And it's a shame. It shouldn't be that way. It's not supposed to be that way. But like it just takes one person in a freaking room like that would give you a hard time, that would make you uncomfortable, It's just a shame. But those people are out there. Other people I know, like me and you, they seem to relish the fight and they'll take those people on. I just don't have it in me to do that.
Yeah,
So
I agree.
I'm
I
just like,
agree. I did not want anything compromising my recovery.
yeah,
I didn't, I was going, you know, the reason why I accepted that I needed to do something about my mental health issue was because of my skepticism. And then a year later, when I started dealing with bad memories, the reasons why I couldn't deny that I had an alcohol problem was my skepticism,
yeah.
my ability to ask questions and not just take something as face value, but say, well,
It's
why
an
do I
asset.
believe this?
It's an asset.
Yeah, exactly. And it's who I am. And I wouldn't be where I am today without this thought process. And so going, like I said, going into an AA meeting with this attitude, while beneficial for me, may be a downer for the room.
Yeah, and it always depends on the group too, and how dogmatic they are, I guess, about the book and all that stuff. Some groups would be totally accepting, all of them, to be happy for you and totally accepting and not give you a hard time. Others might have some people that give you a hard time. Others just might be completely, you know, ready to turn you around. You know, so it's just it kind of depends on the group, but it's a shame that it has to be that way. But you won't. There are secular AA meetings where that won't be a problem, but those are mostly online. You know, probably don't have a lot of them in your area. Um,
I haven't looked since, the COVID restrictions have
yeah,
lifted, and Connecticut is pretty, it's a progressive state,
yeah.
so I wouldn't be surprised to find that they do exist now that I am
Oh,
better equipped.
I know there is one there because there was a person from Connecticut who went to one of those groups who came out to Kansas City and visited us. I just can't remember where it was, but there's a list. I can send you a link to this list of secular AA meetings that they have all over the place. In fact, they're actually listed with the AA central offices in the communities where those meetings are. And I'll send you some links where you can check these things out. But yeah, there definitely is. And Connecticut's a small enough state. It could, whatever city it is in, you could probably get to it pretty easily.
Mhm. And, and I think you were, and I don't know, maybe we didn't talk about this, but when people think about recovery, the first thing that come to mind is AA. And so it's automatically just assume that these are, or this is the only option. And so even, we're all guilty of a cognitive bias and we don't bother, we think we already know the answer and we don't bother to check to see if we're correct or not. So, it's just a matter of
Well,
getting going, doing it.
yeah, and what's really interesting too, the fact of the matter is, and this is based on science, the vast majority of people who get into recovery and stop drinking and find abstinence and improve their lives do so without any kind of program whatsoever. The vast majority of people. And then so that's just a fact. Um, but that doesn't mean that these mutual support groups aren't helpful to a lot of people. Even AA is helpful. But, Life Ring, Women for Sobriety, and Smart Recovery are three excellent secular options. Well, even Dharma Recovery, some people might not consider it secular, but because it's Buddhist based. But what they tell me is it's not a religious Buddhism. I don't know. But anyway, there's at least those three that are completely, totally secular and much, it's great that we have that those options. Um, and I'm sure that they have smart recovery meetings and life ring meetings in your area too, but for certainly you'll find them online for sure. Those in secular AA meetings. So there are a lot of options available. It just kind of makes me sad that AA, which when it started was really trying to be more inclusive. I mean, these people were extremely religious. They came from a group called the Oxford Movement, and that group was trying to replicate first century Christianity, and they were very, very Christian oriented. And these are and they were using this program to stay sober. So these are the people that created AA. And when they wrote the steps, there were some atheists involved that were trying to tone it down to make it more inclusive. But this is a long time ago. This is back in the 1930s. And maybe at that time it was, but it doesn't translate that well now. That's the problem. And it's a shame that something that really started out as trying to be more open and inclusive for everybody has somehow become more narrowly focused on a narrower path, and it shouldn't be that way at all. It's too bad. Um,
Well, I
boy,
know too, one of the reasons why I was seeking community was because, like I said, I don't have family members who are alcoholics. The majority of my friends, my spouse, they all still drink. And so for me, I wanted the opportunity to talk to somebody else who has a similar struggle. Um, but at the same time, with someone not in my family, not somebody who was, like I said, I'm sorry, all my words are coming to me at once. So let me start this again. I was looking for a community so that I could have someone help me with this experience who went through something
Yeah.
similar.
Yeah. It's very nice to have. I was also going to mention there's another group I could send you a link to, the Soberish Book Club. Yeah, they're great. So it was started by a woman in Florida, and she didn't have any use for AA or the steps or anything like that, but she loves to read. So she and some other women started a book club where they would read like recovery literature books, and then talk about it. So what that did for them is not only were they learning from the books they were reading, but they had a supportive community by just talking and discussing the books. And I thought that's really cool. And then there are other groups kind of like that had just kind of sprung up that aren't connected to any kind of an official organization, but are just people that have found each other on social media or something like that. But
Right.
I'll send you a link to them too.
That'd be awesome. Thank you.
Yeah, so many. We are fortunate. There's so many more ways to get sober now. Um, and I'm not gonna, I've really bashed AA quite a bit here, but I find it sad, quite frankly, that there are so many people in AA that are like this, and I know that there are. I hear from those people myself. There's a lot of people that aren't that way. Probably the majority of the people are not like that, but it's just that it takes a small number of very vocal, hardcore people. And it seems like, the ones that are more dogmatic, they're the ones with the loudest voices, and the ones that aren't are kind of more mellow and quiet and you don't hear from. So it's a shame. But yeah,
Yep. And usually, too, even for the people who are, relaxed, laid back, not so dogmatic, but just having that confrontation in the room is enough to ruin their experience too. And so it becomes, well, do I want to be that person who walks into a situation and makes everybody in the room uncomfortable? Even if it's simply because of their own private thoughts or because another person in the room is being confrontational and now we're all uncomfortable.
yeah. And it's really considerate of you to think that way. I wasn't thinking that way, but they were making me feel uncomfortable. So that's why I couldn't go to those meetings anymore. But I probably was making other people uncomfortable too, because when I started being honest and sharing about how I really felt about things, it probably created a certain tension in the room, right? And kind of, I never
Exactly.
really thought about it. Um,
No, when the philosophy is that you're not going to heal unless you believe in a higher power, and then somebody walks into the room and it's like, hey, maybe there is no higher power, then what's the other option? Right? And so logically, we know that's not true. But for somebody who's going through a lot to have to
right.
question that at that moment of time, even if it's only for
It's
30
almost like you're
seconds,
being respectful to the fact that, okay, if you all believe all this stuff, I'm going to respect your beliefs and I don't want to spoil your party. So you guys go on and believe and do whatever you want to do, but it's not for me. I'm kind of that way too. I mean, I could, I stopped going to those damn meetings because I just couldn't. So I started a secular meeting and started going to that. Now, what's ironic now, I have found some AA meetings that I'll go to that I can tolerate, that they aren't real pushy about the God stuff, and they respect that I'm an atheist and it's not a big deal. They don't, so there are groups like that do exist, but they're few and far between. And I know there probably are some people, even in those meetings, that are biting their tongue when I'm talking, but I'm not getting the rolling eyes and stuff like I used to get at my other group. So, yeah, but for the most part, I had to stay away from it too. But there are certain types of people that think it's their obligation to go to those meetings and to be the voice of the atheist and to push back and all that stuff. Not for me.
I, you know, No pun intended, push come to shove, I can be that person. I just choose not to put myself in
It's a
that
lot.
situation if I can avoid it.
Yeah, I personally don't see anything constructive about it, and it just causes me to get tense, you know?
And then if and my past experiences too, when I have been that person, is that there's a spiraling, a downward spiraling that comes with it. Did I push too hard? Was I not respectful? Did I not listen when I should have listened? Did I should I have asked questions? So I just, you know,
Mhm.
worrying about myself is enough.
Yep. That's right. That's right. Well, it sounds like you're doing okay. I mean, you're in a good spot right now. You're sober, you're not drinking, and you're interested in improving your life and finding ways to do that. It's a shame that these people that were supposed to be there to help weren't very helpful. They were ignorant, I guess, about what's actually out there, which is a shame.
Well, I mean, and like you pointed out, the information is also available on the AA website. So, where's the disconnection between AA and a national hotline? What were they lacking? What information? And I know you've already pointed out that usually the people who handle these hotlines,
I
they
don't
are.
think that secular AA groups are that well known, even within AA, because there really aren't that many compared to the number of other AA groups. I think there's probably about maybe 500 AA secular AA groups, maybe more meetings than that now online. But compared to the thousands and thousands of regular meetings, it's a small drop in the bucket. So, and I don't even know how many people will go to AA, but the vast majority of them are probably totally unaware that there are secular AA meetings in existence. And they're probably very happy in their own little world that they don't even stop to think about Life Ring, Women for Sobriety, and Smart Recovery either. They think that they found their way and it is the way. So yeah, yeah. But again, like I say, fortunate that we do have other options, and you can mix and match things too. It's not like you have to find one particular program either. It's all kinds of, you mix and match and do whatever is comfortable for you. Um, therapy is a good thing to check out too.
And I do see a psychiatrist for
Yeah, I
medication.
do too.
But I'm currently not in like talk therapy. And when I was looking into AA, the reason why I didn't want to do talk therapy was because I didn't want the the what am I trying to say? The power struggle. And that might not even be the right way of saying it, but like the doctor is the person in position of power, and I'm the patient, so I'm not in that same level of position. Whereas if I'm talking to you, you and I are, we're on the same level, and
Right.
so we're just having a conversation, as opposed to like an expert that
Yeah.
I'm paying.
Right.
I'm looking for friends, not
Yeah.
another doctor.
Gotcha. Okay, that's fair. And I do the same thing. I take an antidepressant, and I see a psychiatrist. We talk a little bit, but not in depth talk therapy or anything. I've done that before, and I'm like you. I don't really want that right now. I don't really feel like I need it right now. So I can understand that. I mean, my medication works for me pretty well.
Yeah, same here. And and I'm sure it's probably because I'm was on my medication for a year that also helped me to think more clearly, and as a result helped me to realize, okay, that I had a problem. I was drinking for all the wrong reasons, and they're dealing with the consequences and the fallout from drinking.
I've had doctors before tell me also that they would have a really difficult time diagnosing someone um, for a mental illness and prescribing for them if they're having a problem with alcohol. It's like they have to get off the alcohol first to be properly diagnosed and treated for depression or bipolar or whatever it might be. So
Yeah. Yeah, and you know what I mean? I knew that there was something going on, that had been diagnosed at that point. And I
yeah,
knew that if I was going to deal with it in a way that was going to make a positive difference in my life, I couldn't drink
Yeah.
because it was counterproductive. It
Yeah.
didn't make sense.
Yeah.
So I stopped drinking, made arrangements to meet with a psychiatrist for the first time 3 weeks after that,
Wow.
and got put on medication shortly after that. And then, like I said, COVID hit,
Yep.
and it was interesting, because a lot of people use this period to drink,
Right.
and a lot of people would drink more than they were
That's true.
before. And then I was kind of going through the opposite
Yeah.
experience where I had just stopped completely and was, stuck at home, not drinking. But, maybe that's where the medicinal marijuana helped me out because I wasn't anxious,
Uh-huh.
you
Yeah.
know. And then also the medication that I was taking was also to help me with a variety of symptoms, including anxiety.
Yeah.
So all that might have been like the perfect storm, so to speak, to come
Yeah.
together during that time period.
And that's what it's there for. That's why it's prescribed. I think that you should feel good about yourself. I hope you do. I think that
I do. I do.
you're definitely on the right track. You're definitely, you're confident in what you believe. You're not going to let other people, impose their beliefs on you. You don't want to impose your beliefs on them. You're respectful of and knowledgeable of what's going on out there. Um, just need some more resources. I can point you to those. So I like seeing this. I mean, there it's you're fighting you found this podcast. That's pretty cool too. So um, there wasn't a lot, back when I was starting out. I would have to go to the library, and I'd read books and figure out what was out there. But it was pretty much AA was, pretty much it. And that's still the major thing.
The more people who talk about it, like even when I was talking about it with my writing group last week, and it's, somebody in the group was saying it's a good thing because more and more people need to hear it. Even if they don't think they need to hear it, they do. And I think what that person was just trying to say was that um, the more people who talk, the more opportunity exists that it will reach somebody who needs to hear it.
Yeah, I think that um, that those of us who are sober, who are in the position to be open about it, are doing a service because it helps eliminate the stigma behind not just being having an addiction, but being in recovery from an addiction. Um, and that stigma has been reduced significantly over the years. We still have a ways to go, but it has. So I try to be open as I can, as open as I can. I'm in the position where I can be. So
And plus the added burden too that if you're a non-believer, and you know sharing your experiences as a non-believer can help other non-believers
absolutely.
who are recovering.
Yep.
um, because I know just listening to other people, that's how I found out about people who are Buddhist and they don't necessarily believe in the whole idea of a higher power the
Right.
way
They don't.
other people think of it.
Right.
But for them, it's something that exists outside of
Right.
themselves that allows them to make a change from within themselves. Something
Yeah.
outside access something within, and vice versa.
Yeah. I did an episode with a friend of mine here in Kansas City who's an atheist and helped start at that time it was called it was called it's Dharma Recovery now. It used to be called something else. Anyway, Refuge Recovery used to be called Refuge Recovery, and he helped start one of those groups here in Kansas City. But I read the book that the program is based on, and I talked to him, and even though it's based on this on Buddhism, there's also kind of like a lot of science behind it too. In that it's a very it's not a linear type progression where you just go through 1, 2, 3, 4 as a program. It's like things are happening simultaneously. Um, and you just kind of get honest with yourself, take a look at yourself, and you have a community of people. It's yeah, I can see how that would be secular. So yeah, that's a great tool. I mean, people love it, and I liked the book when I read it. I thought it was pretty good. So um, a lot of options, a lot of options.
Cool.
So
Awesome.
so what encouraged you to reach out to me on this podcast?
Well, so a lot of reasons, and they're not. So I'm just going to give you these reasons, but they're
Okay.
not in an order.
Oh, yeah, that's fine.
All right. So I'm starting my own podcast, and I'm working
Oh,
with a professional, a producer, a professional.
okay.
And I wanted to have the experience on the other end,
Yeah.
so that I would know how to talk to people when I'm approaching them about
Uh-huh.
being on the podcast, or when I'm talking to them
Yep.
during the podcast.
Yep.
Then honestly, my other reasons also were like what I told you. I wanted the ability to kind of share my story. I wanted the opportunity to ask my questions. I wanted to kind of talk about like some of the hurdles that I had to deal with was trying to find help, and what it means when you're a non-believer looking for help. And so those would be like my biggest reasons.
Yeah. Yeah. So what's your idea for the podcast?
It's called To Be Determined Conversations About Doubt. And
Oh.
it's basically having people share their experiences with doubt,
Oh.
and how it has helped them to kind of transition from one point in life into another, and
Oh.
how it has impacted their lives, preferably in a positive way. It doesn't have to be necessarily non-believers.
Right.
So the first person that I talked to, she is a former Dutch reformist,
Oh.
and she is now a New Age Christian.
Oh, okay.
So she talked about her experience, things like modesty culture or modest culture, and that kind of stuff. Her experience with picketing and condemning, and then how she just started to question a lot of these things, and how she came to the person she is today.
That sounds interesting.
Thank you. And so I was actually going to save this in an email when I said thank you so much for having me on your podcast and blah, blah, blah. But if you happen to know of anyone who might be interested in talking to me in the future,
Mm-hmm.
I'd be more than happy to get that information, or give
Okay.
you my information to pass along to them.
Oh, I definitely will. I definitely will. It sounds like a really interesting podcast. I'll definitely listen to it. If you
Thank you.
need any, if you have any questions about it or need any help, feel free to reach out to me. I'd be happy
Thank
to,
you.
give you any knowledge that I have or any experience I have. I've been doing it for 7 years now. Hard to believe, but I think that you'll enjoy it. I find that I've grown a lot from doing this podcast because of all the different people I've been able to talk to. I learned from each one and every one of them,
Right.
and you get to talk to people that at least I haven't, I'm talking to people I wouldn't have an opportunity to speak with otherwise.
Well, and I also too, I think we're so conditioned to be afraid of doubt, right?
Yeah.
And whether it's doubting your religion or doubting somebody you
It's
love.
scary, isn't it?
Yes, exactly. And I think that if we give voice to that fear, but also acknowledge how doubt has a positive impact on who we are as people, I think it can help facilitate a bigger conversation. And maybe for people like us, if we won't, we wouldn't find ourselves in situations where we'd be afraid to express our non-belief if people weren't afraid of doubt.
Very true. I was one of those people that was afraid. So when I first was really coming to terms with the fact that I was an atheist, I was afraid to tell anybody. So I was reading books like Christopher Hitchens, Richard Dawkins. I was reading these books. I wouldn't let anybody know I was reading them. Even my wife, who's also an atheist, if she came by and saw me reading one of these books, I'd just, I was, for whatever reason, I didn't even like the word atheist. I thought it seems like it had negative connotation or whatever. And so I had that thing going on, some kind of shame, weird shame. And then I also had this being involved in AA for so long. And I was like, how am I going to do this AA stuff now? So I had all these doubts, right? And I was questioning everything. I would tell people, that at that time in my life, all my beliefs were on the table for inspection. Everything. And it turned out to be, that was a very positive thing that I went through, because I got confident in what I really believed. I'm happy to be an atheist. I'm not ashamed. I'm happy and proud of that. And I can talk about being it. And I was able to figure out how practical my recovery is, even the steps and all that stuff. So it turned out to be and got involved with this podcast. So it turned out that my initial doubts, even though it scared me, and at first I was hiding it, I was processing stuff. And after I was done processing it, I was okay. And it turned out to be better for me in the end.
Yep.
Yep.
Yeah. And, I think there's an expectation too, because a lot of people who are religious will tell you doubt is all right, but as long as you use that doubt to bring you closer to God, and so I think, people are afraid of experiencing doubt because it might be something that takes them away from something that's so core to
Yeah.
who they are. And
Yeah. I think that was partly me like that too, because I was so entrenched in AA, and I don't know, but yeah, for sure. It's change. People are afraid of change.
Exactly.
So,
And and I also think too, when people make changes for better, other people around them can be afraid of those changes too.
absolutely. I think I experienced that as well, because I don't know why. I guess that if, they start questioning their own beliefs, they start having their own doubts,
Yep.
because
I
it's
had
brought out in the
somebody
open.
very close to me who was concerned with my willingness to be so open and public about my atheism. And I had to literally walk them through one question at a time as to how what they thought it meant wasn't that at all. So for example, I was accused of calling other people stupid by being a non-believer, and I had to literally say, is a Jewish person calling a Christian person stupid because they don't believe in the same things? And of course, that person said no. And then, okay, so now take it, apply to us. What is that? But it was literally like one step at a time and one question at a time to get them to realize that my doubt was separate. It had nothing to do with their faith and or doubt.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, tell me, any final thoughts before we shut it down?
No, I don't really think I have any final thoughts. Other than it was great talking to you. I'm really glad I had
enjoyed
this
this
opportunity.
Well, thank you. I enjoyed it too. And I'm definitely going to not only email you links to some of these resources of some of these secular recovery groups, but I'll put them in the show notes too, so other people can find them.
Awesome.
Yeah.
That'd be great. Thank you.
Well, thank you. Stay in touch and let me know how the podcast goes. I might want to come on your podcast. I've had doubts before.
I was going to actually ask you that in an email. So thank you.
Cool.
So,
all right. Well,
all right.
Take care.
Have a good night.